Hi, my name is Emily Kazar, and today we're going to be talking about infancy and the most important parts of it. So there are many different main focal points of infancy. We have brain development, the neonatal period, we have physical and motor development, and then we have sensory and perceptual development, cognitive and language development. And so those are kind of the main areas of focus when you're talking about infancy. And there's kind of subcategories and different things you'll talk about in each one, but the first one we'll start off with is brain development. And so brain development is very rapid from the first 2 years of life for an infant. It's very fast and it happens very quickly just to help the child grow. And so it's the most rapid than any other 2-year span in a human's life. And so you can take any other 2 years from, 8 to 10 or 34 to 36, and the first 2 years of life is going to be more rapid growth, brain development-wise, than any other 2-year period. And then the brain actually grows in size, and the neurons, the complexity of neurons in the brain for an infant grows very, very, very fast during infancy and toddlerhood. And then early experiences can cause consequences later in life. So brain, memorizing and actually physically harming experiences can cause consequences later in life for an infant. So that's brain development. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the neonatal period. And this is considered the first month of a child's life, infant. And so neonates, which is a baby that is in the neonatal period, start, you'll notice arousal, and you'll notice they're capable of retaining things, they're learning. And so neonates are only 1 month old, but they are already making progress compared to their newborn status. And then these newborns are often given exams to assess them where they are biologically and behaviorally. And so there's different types of exams, for example, the NBO that we read about in our book, but this is just a different kind of assessment that can assess where the baby's at and see where their development is. And then we also have that the neonatal period sets the stage for the rest of the development that is to come after. And so this is a very important stage in an infant's life, but not, the end, obviously. And so now we have physical and motor development, which is obviously development physically and motor development. So we have fine motor skills and we have different kinds of motor skills, but the motor capabilities come in a very predictable sequence, and the Giselle scales show that through a graph that we saw in our book, but they show that infants are supposed to do certain things, or roundabout do the same things around the same times in the same ages. And development, it can be influenced by biological events or biological things, and also the environment that the kid is growing up in. And so their development can be affected by their home, by what they're subject to, and this is it plays a part into their physical and motor development. And so they could learn slower or learn faster depending on their environment that they're put into. And then during the first 4 months, their physical growth it grows a lot. So especially you'll see a baby, newborn, it will look very different from a 4-month-old baby. And also their development of internal things and development of their organs and their brain, it just changes very rapidly over the first 4 months of their life. And their self-discovery begins during this stage of infancy. And then they have the different developing systems. We have perceptive, we have motor, cognitive, and social. And these are all the different developing systems that are developing during this infancy stage and further on. But we're only talking about infancy right now. Continuing on physical and motor development, as I said earlier, we have different types of motor skills. We have fine motor skills, and then we have gross motor skills. Fine motor skills develop at 5 to 8 months, which is in the infancy stage, and towards the end of infancy, they are working on their gross motor skills, and they begin to develop. Most infants by 1 year or 12 months are standing and working on their first steps. And then they also have developed the pincer grasps and many other different skills. They know how to feed themselves for the most part. They can play games, just with family, probably the people they're most comfortable with. And then one other thing is malnutrition. So this can affect a infant's physical and motor development if they are not correctly fed or fed the right things. They could end up being delayed in their physical and motor development. So if a child is malnourished, or they just have the lack of food, which is marasmus, and that can lead to their development being delayed. And then most infants consume primarily or only milk, so formula or breast milk, for the first 6 months of their life, but the culture that the child is subject to influences the time that the child is weaned off of milk. So different cultures suggest that childs be weaned later. Different cultures suggest that children be weaned earlier. And so just the culture influences when the child is weaned. And weaned is just simply taken or slowly, gradually removed from drinking only milk and given more substantial food. And then we have our sensory and perceptual development. And so on the flip side, instead of actual physical things, this is more of mental things that a child develops through. And so infants, when they're first born, they can see up to 7 to 10 inches in front of their face, and that develops as they grow. And then their focus develops around 3 to 4 months, so they can focus. And much of the infant's facial perception ability is actually biologically programmed, so their facial perception is kind of already there, and they can notice that very quickly. And so it's something that when someone says you're born with it, you're literally born with it. It doesn't take very long to develop. And then the depth perception is also developing at a very early age. And then their hearing, it develops within the first few months. And then this sets the development for language. This sets the stage for language development. And language development is at the end, but it's just when the child hears their language, getting more comfortable with it. And these things are all happening very fast with the infant. They're happening at a very quick rate, and the child is changing so much within this first infancy period. Then we have cognitive development, and this has a lot to do with the sensual and perception, the same development. They link very closely together, but cognitive development has a lot more to do with the sensory motor period, which is the first from birth to age 2. And Jean Piaget, in his schemas, however you say it, it shows a very detailed chronological order of a child or infant's cognitive development during that first 2 years. They become more elaborate, obviously, as the infant develops, so very small things happen at the beginning, and then towards the end they're learning more complex things because they have developed to learn those complex things. And then we also have imitation that happens during this time, so child will start to imitate what they see. They will attempt to, walk and attempt to talk, and that has a lot to do with the combination of the different developments. And then infants also have good memories, so the cognitive development shows that infants' memories are based off of events that happen and different things that they can see visually or hear. And then this is a precursor, again, to language development, and it's leading up to what's going to happen. And then we have language development. And there's receptive language, and we have productive language. And usually your receptive language is more advanced than your productive language. Receptive is basically understanding, and that you can see that because an infant, walking around, they understand what you mean, but they might not be able to physically talk back to you and answer, but they'll do what you ask them to do. And so this is just kind of true when learning a language, that your receptive language is generally more advanced than your productive. And then the most common words include bye, mommy, daddy, uh-oh, and that's within a whole bunch of different countries. Most babies say the same things, woof woof, and so these are like the first words you'll hear from an infant. Especially here in America, this is the very first words that you'll hear. But these are the ones that are most common. And so during language development, a baby will start babbling, and this babbling leads them to become more comfortable with their language and become kind of explore their own voice. And this will lead to them obviously speaking more. And there's kind of a sequence that a language learning sequence, if you will, and kids will say single words, usually a noun, so like mommy, daddy, and then it'll go into 2-word sentences like I want, or something very simple, and then it'll eventually develop into complex sentences and complex phrases that the infant will use. But this is kind of the progression of the child learning the language and developing into it. And then most infants, for the most part, have developed and said their first word by 1 year old. Of course, all of this varies, all the times, if you will, that an infant has done things isn't exactly perfect, because there are other things that lead into delayed or exceptionally progressed children. So it's a very varied time, if you will, that children and infants develop. But this is around 12 months, or any of the other statistics I've given. But these are the main points of my PowerPoint, and that is it.